All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here as always with Drew Dinsick. I'm dressed in black today, Drew, because it's funeral. We finally got him. We got them. The Philadelphia Eagles. They go down. Jalen Hurts, MVP, still the favorite in the market, bafflingly. I'm not sure he'd be in my top three favorites currently, not based on who I think deserves to win, but also based on who I think will win after today. I think that was the big story. We'll get into that. We'll talk about the other games on the Sunday slate. We're recording halfway through the second quarter of Packers-Chiefs. We'll talk about Week 14 openers. And then not a great Monday Night Football game, Bengals-Jags, but we'll talk about ways to get into that too. But Drew, how was your Sunday? What were your big takeaways?
Yeah, incredible Sunday from a betting perspective. The only thing that really went sideways for me is that Mike Tomlin's Coach of the Year. You could probably throw some dirt on that. That was a joke. I mean, yeah, you lost your starting quarterback, but that kind of effort against a team in the Cardinals that's playing for a draft choice was pretty pathetic. I will say that I guess starting from the top, you ready? Let's rapid fire these. Massive result for San Francisco. Thank goodness that over hit, because if they had just won and kept that under, I would have been pretty angry right now. But yes, them winning and getting the over was kind of the best of both worlds. That was the most consequential game just in terms of like understanding these teams, although I don't think that necessarily tilts the NFC probability all that much, because Philadelphia has to lose not just to Dallas this upcoming week, but another weird loss in order to really open the door for San Francisco. Like, it's far, far, far from tilting the balance in terms of who gets the one seed. And the one seed is where? What's that?
They've got San Francisco's got 3 losses. Philly's got 2. If Philly loses to Dallas, and San Francisco will have the tiebreak over them. So San Francisco would have to run the slate, but they're tied. But with the division for Philly, they will need to lose another game on top of that to lose out to Dallas and go to the 5 seed.
There we go. Thank you very much. So I will say, though, that was consequential for the 1 seed, but Niners still need help. More of I guess of more consequence, or at least kind of more clarity of understanding the playoff picture. I mean, the wild card for the NFC all of a sudden looks pretty crystallized to me. It looks like Dallas, the Rams, and the Packers. These are your 3 best teams, clearly among those that don't have division footholds. And the big win by the Falcons today, combined with losses and sort of a free fall feeling from the Saints, I would expect that's your 4 seed. So, yeah, I mean, the Lions cover, and they win and cover by the hair of their chins in a game that they probably should have won by margin. That's probably your 3 seed. So yeah, I mean, the NFC playoff picture is they're not very good, but the playoff picture of the NFC is starting to crystallize, right?
Yeah, I think so. We'll see with the Packers, and we'll see what happens in this Chiefs game. But I agree that definitely. Well, I think Seattle is still at least an average team, maybe slightly above average. I think the Seahawks, the Rams, and the Packers are in a similar boat, and the Packers just have a lot more upside because we know what Matthew Stafford is, we know what Geno Smith is. There is a non-zero chance Jordan Love is just like the 9th best quarterback in the NFL, and we're just finding it out now. Whereas Geno Smith, I don't think has that upside. But yeah, I agree. It seems like it is crystallizing a bit, but let's focus on the big one, Niners Eagles, which was fascinating from a betting perspective. Niners closing 3, basically. I think the fact that the rain did not affect the game whatsoever, I think that probably helped Brock Purdy based on his performance last time in the rain against Cleveland, which was his worst game of the season by margin. But I mean, there's a lot of places to go with this. We'll talk about MVP probably more throughout the week. But if you think Jalen Hurts should be favored over Brock Purdy, I don't know what to tell you. He shouldn't be favored over Purdy or Prescott. But to me, Drew, as someone who's very confident coming into the Niners game, the early takeaway was not that the Niners were struggling on offense, and they struggled those first 2 series. That was a debacle. But it was just the amount of time that Jalen Hurts had. And in my mind, it crystallized a lot of things about the narratives on these 2 quarterbacks, where for some reason, Purdy's got Purdy gets demoted in the eyes of people because of all his supporting cast weapons and Debo and Ayuk and Kittle and McCaffrey. And Hurts, some reason, doesn't as much, even though he has just as many superstars for mine. And just the visual experience of watching this game and seeing Lane Johnson just kind of cook Nick Bosa and seeing the amount, like, it was a comical amount of time from Hurts. He took one of the worst sacks I've ever seen in my life, where he had like 5 seconds in the pocket.
Two. He did that twice.
Well, the one where he fell over as well. That was terrible too.
Yeah.
The amount of time that he had. And Purdy's running for his life every play because he's got one offensive lineman, Trent Williams, and everyone else is bad. And he's under constant pressure. And they had to adjust the game plan to make it shorter passing. And so he could get it out quickly. And when they made that adjustment, then it was just all over. Well, it was five touchdowns, 6 touchdowns, 6 possessions effectively. And then it was done. So, I mean, what kind of ramifications do you think this has for the Super Bowl market, for your rating of San Francisco? Do you think they are just tier 1 by themselves at the moment?
Well, yeah, I mean, Jalen Hurts clearly not my MVP. But yeah, I think the rematch is going to entirely depend on locale, which I gamed out a million different ways to try to get the Eagles out of the 1 seed. It's hard. They almost certainly have to lose this week. So basically the Niners need help still. And, maybe that happens, but, a playoff environment in the link is maybe a little bit different scenario, because here was my major takeaway of that game. In the first quarter, it felt like the Eagles pass rush was like, hey, we got to get home. We have to be the factor here. Like this is on us. Like, we know our secondary's in trouble if they get exposed. And the pass rush kind of left it all on the table in the first quarter. And then they were out of gas because they played 94 snaps last week, which was the entire reason that the Niners closed 3-point favorites. Like, I lost count, Jay, of how many times I heard people who don't bet on sports making commentary about the fact that the Eagles were dogs at home and why. And it was making me want to scream at the television. Like, they are dogs at home because their defense has a massive disadvantage considering what happened last week and the fact that the Niners have extra rest. That is what is built into this price. And yet, I think there is a decent chance, and people may not want to hear this, and I'm not saying that this is the time to really heel turn and go pro Eagles, but the Eagles still do have a schematic advantage offensively with the way they run their offense that is going to be tough to beat in the playoffs, particularly if the playoffs go through the link. If they get a bye before they have to play, I don't know, the Cowboys or the Rams or something like that, like, it is going to be hugely, hugely likely that the Eagles are hosting the NFC Championship game. And I don't know. I think they're still the team to beat in the NFC. But I do think that the MVP now is clearly not Jalen Hurts, and the fact that he's the favorite is annoying.
Yeah, I think that's just anchoring to the fact that they still have the best record, and he was the presumptive favorite, and people still have a certain block with Purdy. But the Eagles' defense is really strange to figure out because, the names on paper, they still look good. It's still the same elite pass rush as last year. Still Slay and Bradbury, but they've just both gotten worse. And the linebackers, and I know that Cunningham's out, and they've got injuries there. And also just Reddick and Sweat just haven't been as dominant. But it's kind of like a worse version of the Cowboys defense, where it's just all the pass rush. And if the elite pass rushers don't get home, then it can get very vulnerable on the back end. But I agree. When they are a bit more rested, the Niners also had the health advantage in this one, although I got kind of a little bit knocked around by Dre Greenlaw getting himself ejected in the third quarter. But when you have guys like Cunningham coming back and Dallas Goedert, who's a huge part of this offense, I do think it will be a bit closer. At the same time, the Eagles are still the clear favorite to get the 1 seed, but it's not much better than I think it's around 50% now, just because the Niners' schedule, they got 1 game against Baltimore. Outside of that, this Niners team, they're 12.5-point favorites at home to Seattle. Seattle's good. It's unbelievable how good this Niners team is and how they're respected by the market accordingly. So I don't know, man. I think this team is a juggernaut. I'd be taking them to win the NFC, even if they don't have home field.
I have a funny feeling we'll be revisiting that Seahawks price before the end of this show. But I think this is your points are fair. Hearing you talk about it is starting to crystallize some thoughts in my head. If the Niners wrestle away the 1 seed, they're going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
like they'll be 6-point favorites at home against whoever comes out of the other side. Like I have no questions in my mind about that. Right? If the Eagles hold on to the 1 seed for dear life, which is not crazy. Number one, Hurts is doing a little bit of blocking Dak and Purdy in the MVP race, which opens the door for the AFC 1 seed. Although, obviously, Pat Mahomes not putting up numbers tonight yet. That said, I think the Eagles would be something like a pick'em if these teams replayed in a NFC Championship setting. What would you make an NFC Championship rematch? Because I sincerely doubt it would be Niners favored by 3.
No, probably not 3. But I mean, based on the performance today and based on this line and everything around it, I would think that it'd be Niners -2, -1.5, maybe that type of range. And we'll see how these teams close. But yeah, I don't imagine it would be 3. But I mean, let's see. This team looks like a complete juggernaut at the moment. One last thing on this. Just this game and the discourse around it, it just crystallizes just how stupid and inane the way that we view the MVP race is, because I didn't think Purdy was amazing today. Like, his stats were incredible, but it was a lot of short stuff. It was a lot of throwing to open guys. And here's the thing is that if he loses the MVP, it's going to be because of the games against Cincinnati and against Minnesota. I thought he was fantastic in those games until he got concussed. I actually thought he played better in those 2 games than he did in this game against the Eagles. He was making tougher throws. I thought he's played better. But of course, it's this game that's going to vault him in the minds of voters and get him right firmly in the discussion.
I got to interrupt you because this was you hit something on the head, which I think a lot of people that listen to the show should just hear us say out loud. When we talk about the MVP race, we are handicapping the voters.
Yes. And
what will happen, not who is the most valuable player. And what is absolutely absurd is that this result and a 4-touchdown, 0 interception performance by Brock Purdy beating the Eagles will, launch him in the minds of the voters. I 100% agree with you. This was not one of his better performances at all. And honestly, is kind of like, man, I kind of was expecting more. It left a little bit wanting. I don't know. Like, I mean, he didn't make the mistake, but we don't expect him to make a mistake. But there was a lot of stuff that the likes of Deebo Samuel and the schematic advantages that are afforded by Kyle Shanahan being your coach really kind of unlocked in this one.
He made some, like the 3rd and 7th throw to Ayuk on the right sideline where he turned down McCaffrey in the flat just to hit Ayuk, because that was a perfect throw. And that throw won them the game, basically, because after that, then they drove down and then the game was effectively over. He threw one up for grabs to Blankenship, I think, over the middle that could have been picked. But outside of that, it was a very clean performance. I think it showed something. And this is the type of stuff that the MVP race loves, the fact that he started so poorly on the road in the place where he got injured last year and then he bounced back to have the stat line that he did. But yeah, it is a little kind of college football playoff committee-ish, this discourse around it. But
I hate it.
Anything else from the Sunday slate that leapt out to you before we jump to openers?
Man, I mean, the biggest game of real consequence, right? Like, Niners Eagles had faux consequence because if the Eagles win, they're your locked in 1 seed, game over, right? And now there's a little bit of a suspense. Okay. Denver Houston, I thought, was massively consequential. The teams in the fight for the wild card right now in the AFC all have very, very soft schedules. And then you have the likes of the Buffalo Bills, who have a very tough schedule, but are like all universe offense. which means that the loser of Denver-Houston, in my opinion, was kind of on the outside looking in of a playoff spot. And that game was extremely close. Super well contested game. Nico Collins, I mean, credit, really, really incredible performance by him, especially against a secondary that has so many really good cover corners. And Russell Wilson had some fluky picks. Ultimately, that was what doomed the Broncos here. I thought the Broncos were the better team, but Houston, comes away with the victory thanks to high efficiency in the right times. I think this basically secures a playoff spot for Houston. Am I crazy?
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly firmly odds on after today, particularly because Denver, who have a relatively easy schedule down the stretch, as do Houston, just getting the tiebreak over Denver and going a game up on them in the standings, that is pretty key. The fact that the Steelers lost as well is key because Houston's got the tiebreak there as too. So, I mean, it was a weird game. I came in thinking that Houston might just kind of wax them, and they didn't, and they very easily could have lost. I thought it was Stroud's numbers in the end were fine, but I thought that was one of his weaker games, just mainly with the sacks, and that's his one thing. Look, he's a rookie; he's going to get better. I think that by the time we get into next year, he's going to be considered one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL. He's not kind of knocking on the door of that already, but he does take some bad sacks. He took 5 sacks today. It's not like Denver's pass rush is particularly intimidating. They lose Tank Dell for the season as well, which is a big loss after being banged up on the offensive line as well. So we'll see with the Texans. I mean, their defense was impressive, little turnover dependent, but they have such a cushy schedule from here. I mean, now you get Trevor Siemian, you got 2 games against Will Levis, you have Joe Flacco and Gardner Minshew, and that's your season. That's all that's left. It's just those 5 games. So
wow,
they are a decent chance. Certainly, I mean, I just think the nature of that team and some of their inconsistency still, they'll probably just drop one of those games because that's what happens. But I think they're in very good position to go 11-6, and at that point they're firmly in the playoffs. Last thing before we jump to the openers, staying in that division, for whatever reason, I just happened to watch a lot of Colts Titans. It is a miracle of modern science that the Indianapolis Colts are 7-5. That team is not good at all. They cannot defend the run without Grover Stewart. He comes back next week. They're missing Juju Brents, who is probably their best outside corner, if we're going to say that Kenny Moore's a slot corner, even though he plays outside a fair chunk now. And Minshew is terrible. He's absolutely terrible. They're getting, and his stats on the surface look fine. And overall, his stats kind of look fine. But if you actually watch the plays that he is getting away with, I mean, today he throws a pick, which doesn't show up in the stat sheet because it was on a 2-point conversion and gets run back for 2 the other way.
Yep.
He should have had another one that was almost picked to lose the game at the end of regulation. Yeah. Awful strip sack fumble that you just cannot take in the red zone. I mean, that team is awful. And Steichen's, he's not getting as much buzz as DeMeco Ryans because I think just the Texans are just the more exciting and more visible team, and they have CJ Stroud. But both of those teams are 7-5. There is, in my mind, on merit, there is no case for Ryans over Steichen at this point for Coach of the Year. Now, you can say the Texans project as being better going forward, and thus Ryans should be favored over Steichen. I get that. But like right now, the job that Steichen is doing is completely insane.
Yeah, no notes. That was very, very well said. The Colts needed 2 back-to-back block punts in order to take this game to overtime.
Yep. It's baffling. It's insane that team is 7-5 with the injuries and just with the personnel. I mean, that to me is a 6-11 team, and they're already ahead of that. So they've got an easy schedule as well. So we'll see what happens there. All right, before we get to openers, this Sunday night, Drew, it's a huge matchup between alleged MVP candidates. Certainly one of them I will accept. And Super Bowl contenders when Jalen Hurts and the Eagles travel to Dallas for a battle with Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock. All right, Week 14 openers. Did anything leap off the page to you here?
There's a couple that I had eyes for before we even got here, and they are big old dogs. One of them is the Ramley, as I am now officially a Rams fan. Actually, I got to dig my Cooper Cup jersey out of storage from Super Bowl week and wear that the rest of the season because
With you
I
when you
think
bought that in LA.
yeah, Rams. Rams. The Rams are live, in my opinion. Excited about today's effort, by the way. Like, really well done, guys. Like, that was a big one for me. Thank you.
Rams fan or something?
Rams fan, Ramley. Here we go. I think they're live against Baltimore. Honestly, this opens 7. I was hoping for 7.5. Maybe there will be some early Baltimore bets that take this back to 7 before I get down. But I think this is a decent spot to look. Rams. I know they have some injuries in the wide receiving core. Puka Nacua obviously went out in the first half, but came back and was super effective in the running game for the Rams. Yeah. I don't know if you saw a couple of those design runs were just spectacular. Right. One of them got called back by holding, so it didn't show up on the stat sheet. Let me just tell you, like, more of that, like that. Those were outstanding plays. So yeah, I think the Rams are live against Baltimore. That 7-point spread is big. I have an inkling to get involved with the Seahawks against the Niners at 12.5 points. Is that crazy?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's one of those lines that seems too big and also seems like the favorite will cover anyway eventually. I think the thing is that the Niners, their pass rush just devours Seattle whenever they play because the Seattle O-line is so bad. Maybe that's been a bit lost in the wash today, that just because the Eagles O-line is apparently the greatest O-line in history, because today was completely insane that they were able to do that to Bosa and Armstead and Chase Young. I mean, it was like men against boys, some of these plays. But it does seem a little bit big, 12.5. Seahawks off extra rest as well with their season on the line. Maybe some emotional letdown for the Niners. But yeah, I'm with you on the Rams. That seems a little bit too big. I'm not sure that people have fully absorbed that the past 3 games for the Ravens really haven't been that impressive. Losing to the Browns. They beat the Bengals, but Joe Burrow was moving the ball before he got injured, and then not a super impressive game against the Chargers either. A couple that jumped out to me, and I think there are 2 games really.
I know which 2 you're going to say too.
Okay, well, they're both dogs. I don't know. Maybe we're not on the same page. Let's see. So I don't think the Lions should be 5-point favorites at Chicago.
Oh, wow. That wasn't one of them. Okay.
Yeah, okay. I think that's too big. I don't think the Lions are very good. I think the Chicago defense is just legitimately very good. Think about what Minnesota were able to do in terms of moving the ball against New Orleans and Denver with Josh Dobbs and Atlanta to some respect. And then Chicago just completely destroyed them. I think having Sweat on there, we talk about how a number 1 cornerback, what it can do in terms of repercussions for your entire defense. Well, how about having like a premium edge rusher as well? I think that has really helped them. Jared Goff outdoors. The Bears really should have beaten them in Detroit a couple of weeks ago as well. And then I know the Broncos are perhaps a little inflated in public perception after this winning streak, but I'm not sure they should be 3-point dogs on the road against the Chargers. I think that should be inside of 3. But what do you think of those 2, and what were the 2 that jumped out to you?
Yeah, Chicago for me, I have to get a read on what the weather is going to be like before I get involved there, because that's literally going to be the difference between taking anything outside of 3 points and taking the money line for the Bears. So we know we're on the same page there. Like, I don't disagree that the dog is value there. It's just, how do you play that? And to me, it comes down to weather. The ones that I was like kind of expecting you to say, the Jets are now a Trevor Siemian team, Jay, and they're up against Houston, laying 6.5 on the road. The Houston Texans are laying 6.5 on the road against the Jets, and this is now a Trevor Siemian experience. I don't know if he's like notably better, but I have to really think hard about that one. The other dog that I was kind of somewhat expecting you to at least kind of throw into the mix is Carolina, because Carr is not coming back anytime soon, right? Like, this is now the James Winston experience, and Carolina's defense, they were okay today.
Yeah, Panthers. I mean, it was a somewhat respectable showing, able to cover against the Bucks. But yeah, if that's Jameis, I think that line will come down a little bit. I guess
I think, yeah,
Trubisky
it's
should
just
be
a
a six
dog
and a
week,
half point
man.
favorite against the Patriots. That's kind of a difficult one to get a gauge on, particularly with the Steelers had a lot of injuries out of today. TJ Watt got
Yeah,
banged up, and they had some
yeah.
other losses as well. With the Jets, I don't really understand how the market is pricing this team, and haven't for the past couple of weeks, where I didn't understand why the Dolphins weren't double-digit favorites. I didn't understand how this Falcons line got down to 1 at some point. Like, Tim Boyle might be the worst quarterback who's ever played in the NFL outside of, what was his name? Kendall Hinton? Was that his name? The wide receiver who played
The
for the
wide
Broncos.
receiver, yeah.
At least Kendall Hinton offered a rushing threat, which Tim
Yes,
Boyle doesn't. But someone who desperately needed the Falcons today, when Simeon came in, I got a little scared because I was very confident that Tim Boyle wasn't going to march down the field, and I was pretty confident Simeon wasn't going to either. But at least he's different,
yeah.
and he looked a little bit more competent. Again, both of those guys just have no pocket awareness and just seem like they're a strip sack waiting to happen every 5th play. But I think that Simeon probably has to be better. And that Jets defense is still just absolutely incredible. So, I mean, we'll see. It's very difficult to imagine Trevor Simeon staying within a touchdown of CJ Stroud, but this is the best defense that Stroud will have faced probably since week 1 and against Baltimore. Effectively, Stroud's played some very easy defenses in this run. So that'll be a fun game to think about through the week. All right. Before we get to another fun game to think about, Bengals-Jags, don't miss a Big Ten basketball doubleheader this Tuesday, Drew. First, watch Michigan State host Wisconsin at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, and keep the action in the Great Lakes State when Indiana take on Michigan at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can catch both games only on Peacock. Any college football playoff thoughts, Drew, before we get to Bengals-Jags?
It's Michigan's world. We're all living in it.
Yep, it is the Great Lakes State, apparently. Tough scenes for the Michigan folk because they found out they were playing Alabama instead of FSU. But I'm sure they're happy just to be there after eking past Ohio State. Ohio, Cincinnati Bengals at the Jags. Jags -10. Total is 40. This market open Jags -8. Do you think this move, fairly sizable move, is justified?
No. Dagger pass. Yeah. I have no skin in this game at this moment. But the fact that this is 10 kind of offends my sensibilities. The injury report is less favorable to the Jaguars. Travis Etienne questionable, Tyson Campbell questionable. These guys matter. I would say that Cincinnati's defense has been an absolute abject disaster now going on 3 weeks. However, they are getting healthier. So there's a decent chance that Cincinnati puts together an okay performance defensively. The Jacksonville Jaguars offense is not fixed. I still have huge questions about these guys. In fact, I don't think it's entirely foregone conclusion that Jags are going to win the AFC South. Houston, with their remaining schedule, could steal this thing.
How about Colts?
The Colts could steal this thing. The Colts lost both of their.
Yeah,
they're 0-2 against the Jags, right? Whereas Houston split. Houston split though, right?
Yeah, but they lost the game to Indy in the divisional record.
That's true. That's true.
So they need to finish, probably, if I'm understanding it correctly, they're going to finish a game ahead of Jacksonville.
Yeah, so it's probably a foregone conclusion. But that said, I don't know what is exactly compelling people to believe that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to come out in this game and absolutely thump the Bengals. Bengals are, they're still a team with a lot of players who have played a lot of high leverage games in the playoffs the last couple of years. They have some good bona fide blue chippers. This should be competitive. I'm not a guy that is dying to go to war with Jake Browning, so I haven't bet it. But it's getting close to the price where I just can't. I can't walk away from this one. If anything, I may dial in on a first half Bengals play, and the idea that The Bengals keep this competitive at least for a half. If it is Jags runaway in the first half, I'm going to look for a live entry on Cincinnati's second half, just because the Jags defense seems to let everybody hang around. But I don't have a ton of interest betting this game. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting game to think about from the perspective of what would the line be if it were Joe Burrow here. And I guess my mind is kind of frozen in when Burrow went out and how the Bengals defense was rated back then. And I mean, if Burrow is here, isn't this game close to pick? It's going to be not
Yeah,
that far
right.
off of it. Jags maybe
Yes.
slight favorites. And so are we saying that Jake Browning is 10 points worse than Joe Burrow? I think back to when Aaron Rodgers missed the game against Kansas City and Jordan Love came in for that game a couple of years ago, and that line moved, I believe, 7 points. And that was going from not this Jordan Love who we're watching right now apparently is the second coming of Patrick Mahomes. That's when Jordan Love was making, I believe, his first start and was expected to be pretty bad and was terrible in the game. And so that has always been my kind of benchmark for what's just about the biggest disparity that we can have. And that was 7 points, and Aaron Rodgers won the MVP that year. And now, this is just a massive move. Now, I understand that some of it is with the defense and just how comically bad the defense. This is a bottom 3 defense in the league at the moment, I think, particularly with Cam Taylor-Britt, who is still out, which is a problem. And outside of that, I mean, it's Trey Hendrickson, Sam Hubbard. There's not a lot going on this defense. They really miss Jesse Bates, who's been incredible this season. But that would be my concern. And the other thing is, Browning was terrible. Browning was absolutely terrible against the Steelers after being somewhat confident against the Ravens. So, but yeah, I think the 10 is a little too rich for me.
It's a big number. If it gets to 10.5, this is a must play Bengals. But otherwise, I'm out on this one.
Yep. No, I like it. All right. We're done. Don't forget to check out NBCsports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks for those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. Please rate and subscribe if you're listening to us as a podcast. And also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick. Thank you again, Mr. Purdy. We will see you tomorrow.